This month is marking my 1 year anniversary as my start as a coder. For context, I was originally a psychology graduate from the University of British Columbia. I got sick of school when I graduated, and I worked in various restaurants in Vancouver. And during that time, I was also doing esports commentating on the side as a kind of like what if type of plan. I had fun. It was a great time for reasons that I won't get into in this video that didn't work out for me. And now I am trying to get into software development, trying to get my foot in the door in tech. And in September of 2023, I decided to go back to school at the British Columbia Institute of Technology for a certificate in UX and UI design. Originally, the idea was that, psychology and UX and UI design have like some transferable skills, but I still wanted to get something in tech, so I wanted to do UX and UI design. I have now completed all of the required classes for that certificate. I believe it's called an associate's diploma or an associate's certificate, something like that. But I wanted to talk about the coding part because while I finished all of those classes, one of the optional classes for that diploma was HTML and CSS. I made some pretty crappy web designs back, and so this was the semester of starting in September 2024. I made some pretty crappy websites and web designs that were usually tangentially related to something that I enjoyed, and it turns out that I actually really liked it. I kind of got obsessed with the idea of making my own websites and projects about what I cared about. So for example, one of the projects that I did originally was a static HTML, CSS, and like some JavaScript website about D&D, which ended up transforming and kind of like following me through this entire year as like a project that just kept evolving. But regardless of that, I kind of fell in love with that, and I decided that the next semester I wanted to learn more about web development, and I took a JavaScript class. This is in beginning of 2024. That was a year ago, and since then I've learned a lot. I've made a bunch of things, and I've also become a lot more opinionated about a lot of things. So I'm kind of trying to make this video as a way to, in part one is just very simply to track my progress and to kind of journal it. And I want to be able to look back at this video a year from now and laugh about some of the things I said and some of my opinions, and look at it in 10 years ago and see that maybe I had some good points. So I'm kind of making this video as a reflection of the past year, partly, also as a way to document my progress and to journal my experiences. So there's a bunch of different things, but I really wanted to make this as a way to kind of keep track of what's going on. To start off, in the past few months, I've been thinking a lot about what I would have done differently if I were to start over again. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was the terminal. If I were to talk with myself from a year ago, I would tell myself to not be afraid of the terminal. The terminal really used to scare me, which I know it sounds hilarious if you've been a developer for even remotely any amount of time, but I remember my line of thought kind of going along the lines of, what the fuck even is a terminal? What is happening? It's very scary. It's scary and dark. Mom, come help me. I don't know. It's something about the terminal when I was starting was very scary. It felt like I would like break my computer or do something irreversible. And obviously it's, the user experience of a terminal is not exactly great. So when I was starting off, I was pretty scared of the terminal and I wanted a GUI. Please, I would have done anything for a GUI. But realistically, I think you kind of have to learn how to use a terminal as a software developer. I don't think that's like a controversial thing to say at all. A terminal is kind of how it seems to me that that's kind of how you talk to a computer. the user experience of using a terminal is pretty shit. It hasn't changed in decades, but that's for a good reason. It's because the terminal is for people who know how to use a computer with a terminal. It's for developers. Normal people don't have to use a terminal. Like psychology papers that aren't really meant for the average person to understand, the terminal is made for people who know how to use a terminal. They're for programmers. So you need to learn how to use a terminal because you're trying to be a programmer. Nothing about using a terminal is scary now. The vast majority of things that I do on a terminal are pretty boring. It's mostly CD, LS, opening a file. If you're SSHing into a server, it's just about like figuring out permissions. So don't be afraid. Chances are you're going to be fine. That's me talking to myself from the past. Chances are you're going to be fine. And yeah, I mean, the more you use it, the more confident I became. And it didn't take too long for me to kind of understand and get over that fear of using the terminal. So yeah, I think the number one thing would have been be confident using the terminal. You need to learn it either way, so just get used to it. The second thing is use Git. It's like ASAP. It's so useful, it's crazy. It's honestly mind-blowing to me that anyone who does any kind of coding work that's even like tangentially related to development would not use Git or some other software version tracking system. 99% of the questions that I had about how to make coding easier probably have something to do with Git. From, collaborating with other people, or working on the same thing but with two different computers, automating deployments. It's Git. Like, it's just so incredibly useful. And I still have a lot to learn about Git myself, but I've come a long way. I used to use Git with the GUI, the app, the desktop app, and I don't do that anymore. I just use the terminal. And yeah, now I use Git for pretty much everything. I have been kind of slacking lately in terms of like my Git commits. I was on vacation, so unfortunately my Git doesn't look as nice anymore, but there was a period of time where I was committing every day, and it was nice. But beyond the kind of like GitHub statistics or whatever, Git is so incredibly useful. I don't know why I was like so reticent to learn about it, because it's so incredibly useful. Don't use the GUI desktop. Just use it in the terminal, and learn how to use it, because it's an incredibly useful tool and you'll have to use it all the time as a developer. So yeah, that's definitely another thing that I would have learned way earlier if I had known. The next thing I wanted to mention is that to some extent I do believe that building a lot of shitty things is better than building one mid thing. And what I mean by that is that I think it's better when I'm, at least for me personally, I think it was better for me to kind of not worry over the details of a project and just spit something out, even if it's shitty and small, because I learn a lot more and a lot quicker if I don't overthink about how to make the project good. Instead of making something that I think is good, I just make something. And then over time, as you get better at doing the thing, then you can start making something that's actually good. But everything that you do when you're learning and when you're as of a beginner as I am is kind of going to suck regardless. So you're better off not thinking too hard about how to make it good and instead just make the thing. And it's okay to make shit, because that's how you learn. I learned so much by making shitty things. And I'm not kidding. Like, I made a really shitty JavaScript game, like 3 months in, that is like one single JavaScript file, no modules, no imports, nothing. Just like one gigantic JavaScript file that's like functions that have like dozens of lines of code, that probably could have been simplified, and separated, objects that could have been made, if-thens that could have been, maps or cases or whatever. So many things that could have been optimized and done better, but it doesn't matter because through the process of making that game, I learned a lot. including like the canvas element. That was one thing that I had to use for that project. I learned a lot about animations, CSS, and so on. And I basically made, I didn't know about it yet, but I basically made an SPA with like this JavaScript minigame without actually using any like React or anything like that. And you know, I mean, it's shit. Like, it's not a good SPA, but it is technically an SPA. And yeah, that's kind of my point. So next, I wanted to mention no shortcuts, and that's mostly related to LLMs. A year ago, LLMs used to be really shit, and now they're pretty good at writing boilerplate code. So this advice has kind of like changed in my mind since I first started thinking about LLMs and coding. But regardless of how good LLMs think, I think that especially as a beginner, still now and to this day, I don't think that using LLMs or automatic code completion are a good thing. I turn off the LLM-based autocomplete on any of the JetBrains product as soon as I possibly can, or any other code editor for that matter, because not only do I think that it impedes my progress and my learning, it also just feels bad. It takes the joy for me out of coding, because there's something very satisfying to me about typing out a function. It sounds dumb, but it is satisfying to me. So not only do I think undeniably it makes you a worse coder, in the sense that if as a beginner the only thing you use to write code is an LLM, I do think that you're going to be a worse coder overall. You're going to learn slower, but also it's less satisfying. The worst part about it is that first when I discovered this tool, it was kind of awesome. It looks awesome that like the LLM can almost tell what you're thinking of typing, especially when I was writing and learning a lot of like boilerplate stuff like CRUD functions and so on. Like I could press tab on PHP Storm and have a perfectly functional like class for handling requests or whatever the case may be, because a lot of this code is pretty much more or less the same. And while that works perfectly well on like the average code base, it does sometimes, if you're doing something that's like a little bit off-centered, a little bit new, or if you just want to do something in a particular way for some reason, it will autocomplete something that's like complete garbage, and you're going to waste so much time trying to find what went wrong because you don't even remember typing it because you didn't type it. Not only that, but like, again, it just impedes your learning by so much because you don't actually like think for yourself. You're just pressing tab. All in all, don't really use LLMs as a shortcut, and don't underestimate yourself. If something doesn't work, look at the code really carefully. Don't panic. Look at the code line by line. Sometimes what I would do is I would comment out every line, what every line does, and really think as to how the computer is actually doing the thing. Go to the next line, comment it out, think about what it's doing, then go to the next line, and so on. And eventually you'll find the bug. And sometimes like the LLM doesn't find the bug. Sometimes the bug is caused by another function that you didn't include in the LLM, or the LLM forgot about it. Whatever the case may be, sometimes it's better off to think for yourself, both in order to learn faster, and sometimes you will also debug faster than the LLM will, just because the technology is still limited in what it can do. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that if I were talking to myself again from the past, don't forget that you're a beginner, and I'm still a beginner. I'm still learning. So I would have been more forgiving of myself in this past year if I could do it again, because I was just learning, and I was like a beginner at everything. Like JavaScript, coding, React, Node, PHP, SQL, like all of these things are very complicated. They're very hard. I know that's not everyone's opinion, but to me they felt difficult. Every time I had a bug or something didn't work or something didn't go as expected, I felt personally pretty mad. And I still do to to some extent. I still get mad when things don't go my way or there's a bug or something like that. And I feel very dumb when I make syntax errors or I forget keywords or methods, or I misremember like basic concepts. But again, realistically, that is what a beginner does. You make mistakes. You'll make mistakes in any way possible. You'll mistype, you'll make syntax errors, you'll make logical errors, like everything under the sun will happen. But you gotta figure yourself. These kinds of things are the reasons why you're learning, and I presume that that's going to keep happening. I'm going to keep being a beginner and making these kinds of mistakes. It's just about forgiving and moving past them. In league terms, I'm bronze. Well, I was bronze. I think now I'm like silver, maybe gold. I'll say silver. So missing a cannon is completely fine. Take a deep breath and keep playing. When you're stuck on the same function or the same 500 error for the third hour in a row, instead of just getting mad and pissed off at yourself for not being good enough or not being smart enough or whatever, and then nothing happening, take a break, go outside, have some tea, go on a walk, listen to some music, whatever you need to do. And when you come back, the problem will probably become clearer to you. Ironically, sometimes the thing that you need to do in order to get stuff working is to not work for a little bit, just so you can clear your mind and kind of mental reset. Kind of just like League. Now, a little bit of a controversial thing to say because this is a YouTube video, but stop watching streamers or YouTube videos while you're coding. I know it's ironic because I still do this all the time, and this is a YouTube video. And maybe some of the people who are watching are currently procrastinating on writing code or are watching it while they're doing something else. But having something in the background constantly, or having like a YouTube video or a stream on your second monitor, is making both the stream and the YouTube video worse and your experience coding worse. Log the fuck in, close the tab, close the YouTube video or the Twitch stream or whatever, put some music on, and do the thing that you want to do. It doesn't even really matter what specifically you're doing. It doesn't even have to be coding, it could be anything else. But having something on your second screen is not helping you. And yes, it does still count if it is coding related. It doesn't matter if the Primogen is trying out Zig or is trying out Godot. Okay, you have JavaScript homework. Okay, lock in and do your homework, and then you can watch Primogen. Oh yeah, by the way, learn how to touch type. I never thought I would say this, but a year ago I actually didn't know how to touch type, and I spent a good amount of time learning how to touch type using, I believe it was like Learn Type Club, Typing Club or something like that. It's made for like mostly kids, but I got so much better at typing and writing code. It's kind of ridiculous. I didn't realize that I actually didn't know how to touch type until I saw someone else coding. I think, I don't remember who it was, but they never looked down at their at their keyboard to write like an entire function, and I was like, I don't think I can do that. So yeah, learn how to touch type. As like useful skill, you should do it. You'll become a much better typer and coder for it, and it's not that hard. It's honestly kind of fun. So learn how to touch type. So now it's going to be a lot more learning. I only have one class left to complete the requirements for both of my diplomas at BCIT, and then I'll be all done. So within that time, I also have the time to do a lot of other things. I have a few projects that I want to complete as soon as possible, including my main priority right now, that is a recipe manager written in Next and Node. It's a super fun project because I love cooking, and I've made CRUD apps before, so it's not exactly complicated. It's more about doing it well, and there's a lot of time that's being spent on kind of like the design and the architecture side of things on my end, and I've been learning a lot. It's a little bit of a disheartening project because I know for a fact that solutions like the one that I'm building exist already. It's not like a revolutionary idea, but it is something that I care about a lot. I love cooking. I cook every day. I have like a cooking Instagram. I want to make some cooking videos maybe with this camera that I just got. So there's a lot of things that I want to do with that. And it does bring me joy to kind of like make a solution that I care about. But yeah, sometimes I think about the fact that, well, someone did already kind of make this. I do sincerely believe that originality is overrated. Sometimes good execution is what actually matters, and that's kind of what I'm going for here. I'm trying to focus on making the web app look and feel really good. I've recently been inspired by Obsidian. I tried it recently to keep track of my D&D notes, and it is an amazing software. I love it from the bottom of my heart. It's not like I'm not making an ad or anything. It's so intuitive, fluid, easy to use. It's just such an incredible experience using it. It's so smooth. It looks amazing and it feels so good to use. And I'm kind of trying to emulate that, to replicate that feeling with this recipe manager. I really want it to feel in that kind of same way. I'm not trying to like copy Obsidian, just to be clear. It's more of like I'm trying to replicate that feeling of using something that just feels and looks really good to use. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm trying to go for with this project beyond making a decent CRUD app. I'll probably talk about this project again, maybe in another video. Maybe make some kind of like TikTok series or something where I'm like keeping track of what I'm doing on this project. But yeah, that's kind of what's been taking my time recently. Besides that, I'm also obviously trying to find a job at the same time as I'm finishing this class. So far, it's been going pretty poorly. Really not much to say so far. There hasn't been much success. I haven't even been called for an interview so far. But honestly, considering the horror stories I've heard from other people looking for jobs, and the fact that I don't have any actual work experience or an actual CS degree, I'm not particularly surprised that my 50 applications so far haven't found me a job or an interview. I think it's just something that's going to take a lot more applications and a lot more time, maybe even a little bit of luck, networking and personal connections to get me that first job. So I'm not particularly surprised. But it is something that has also been taking my time recently, and it is definitely pretty stressful and anxiety-inducing because, I mean, obviously there's like a lot of self-confidence involved in the sense that I feel like an imposter, especially because I can't get the job. But I am determined to make it work eventually. I have thought about a lot of strategies, have been improving my strategies on what to actually do and how to get that job, and I do think that eventually I will get there. Another thing is I recommended some of my friends who are already developers, and they pretty much all recommended me to practice lead code exercises and my data structures and algorithms. So recently I've been learning C. It's also tangentially related to what I want to do in a more long-term time frame, which I'll get into a little bit later. C has actually made it a lot easier to understand data structures and lead code exercises, so I do plan on continuing learning C. I'm also going to keep reading on data structures and algorithms, maybe buy some of these books, and practicing all of these lead code exercises. That way, when I do hopefully eventually get the interviews, I'll be a little bit more ready to encounter them. So basically, I'm splitting my time in the following manner. The first priority is obviously just to finish school. The second priority is to finish my projects, with the cooking recipe manager app being the first priority. It's applying for jobs, learning C, and then studying data structures and algorithms and practicing lead code exercises in that kind of order of priority. Off the back of me learning C, I do want to learn C++. When I go through a lot of the job offerings, specifically in Vancouver, there's quite a lot of them that mention C++ or that just sometimes straight up require it. I think part of it is that a lot of these studios or places of employment are game studios. They make games, and in terms of game making, C++ does seem to be kind of the dominant language. On top of that, I am really interested in learning how to make games. Originally, I was learning Zig as a kind of like game making language, and while I do want to get back to it eventually, the fact that it's so new makes it more difficult to learn, in my opinion, despite the fact that it's technically easier to write. You don't have to deal with memory management, it's type safe and all of these things, but because it's so new and not as widespread, you get a lot less resources. You get a lot less tutorials, a lot less classes, a lot less documentation about what Zig can actually do in comparison to something like C. On top of that, you can actually like put C on your resume, while Zig isn't as nearly widespread. And some of the things that I want to do with C, C++, and maybe eventually Zig is transition to more low-level stuff. I really like web development, and I think I always will, but I am interested in kind of exploring different fields of computer science, of development, including games, embedded software, and graphics. And ironically, this YouTuber called Ace Rolla was the part of the reason why I got interested in graphics in the first place. His videos are super cool, but he also just in general makes the topic sound very cool and very exciting. There is so much innovation yet to be done in graphics, and I think that's really cool. And it's also just like such a complicated and deep field. Like, I don't know, it's just such a cool field, and I really want to learn more about it, and I do want to get to it eventually. It is insanely complex, specifically to me, because it's such a complicated combination of topics, including math, computer science, geometry, and to some degree, art and aesthetics. So it's an incredibly difficult field, and I am under no illusion that it's going to take me a lot of time to actually get there. But I am excited and hopeful that eventually I will be able to get there sometime. So just to resume, my goals for the future are to get a job, explore more dev things, and eventually get into graphics and games. So that's kind of it. I am really looking forward to the future. I really do think that I will be able to get a job eventually, even though it seems pretty grim at the moment. But, you know, I'm not one to give up easily. And I'm just really excited to see what's going to happen.